This is an audio recording of Bob the Photographer by Arthur M. Winfield, narrated by Right Here Audio. Chapter 31. Bob Goes It Alone. Before the two could draw out of sight, they were discovered by Barker, who was slightly ahead of his companions. "Hello there," he sang out. "There they are, boys." "It's so for a fact," said Casco. "Are they alone?" "Sure and they are," put in Grogan. "A good chance to capture them," suggested Raymond. "What good will it do?" asked Barker. "The new plan will work all right anyway." "Better bag them until this thing is over." "That's so," said Casco. "Come on, we are 4-2. He ran ahead and the others quickly followed. Frank saw them coming and he whipped up his horse. "We must drive for it, Bob," he cried. "They are too many for us." "I would rather stand and fight it out," returned the young photographer, but Frank urged him to follow, and to please his companion, Bob did so. As Barker and his companions were on foot, they soon outdistanced the crowd, and then Bob called Frank to hold up. "What's best to do now?" questioned the young man. "I have a plan," said Bob. "You go back to Dartonville and wait for the detectives, while I keep my eye on this crowd." "That's asking too much of you, Bob." "No, it isn't. I will follow them wherever they go, and I will leave a paper trail behind me so that you and your men can follow me up. That will be the easiest way of tracking them down." "A paper trail?" "Yes, I have a couple of newspapers I'll tear into strips." "Well, here is another if you insist. If you find the trail ends suddenly, look for a message on the last slip." "I will. And take this horse and buggy. I will go after them on foot." For 5 minutes more, the two discussed the plan, and then Frank drove off with Bob's buggy tied fast in the rear. Once on the ground, Bob lost no time in making his way back to the spot where they had discovered Barker and the others. The young photographer was careful to keep out of sight, and now leaped the rail fence on the side of the road and pushed forward through the bushes. To anyone unaccustomed to this method of advancement, it would have proved slow and laborious, but Bob knew how to go ahead, and he was much too interested to mind the fatigue entailed. When Bob reached the spot, he found the enemy had moved on up the road, but he soon drew close enough to make out their conversation, which they carried on carelessly as they continued up a narrow path leading to the Red House on the Rayville Road mentioned in the message. "What do you suppose they'll do?" asked Raymond. "Not much," returned Casco. "I reckon they've got tired of chasing me." "It's a wonder they don't come down on your place, Raymond," put in Barker. "If they do, they'll find out I skipped for California," chuckled the hotel keeper. "But they just saw you." "It doesn't make any difference. I've skipped and the property belongs to my wife, so what can they do about it?" There was a general laugh, and then Casco and Barker dropped slightly behind and began to converse in lower tones. Bob could not hear what was said, but when he came to a break in the brush, he peered out and saw Casco hand Barker a thick packet done up in a large envelope. "The papers and letters stolen from Blake," muttered the young photographer to himself. "I must get them, without fail." A short while later, the crowd reached the Red House, a low structure built of bricks, many of which were cracked and crumbled. All entered the house, and Bob saw the door closed and heard no more. The youth had been dropping slips of paper all the way. He now took a larger slip and wrote this message upon it. "All in the Red House. I am going in to listen. If I am all right, I will come back for the slip." Bob had just finished writing the slip when a low rumble of thunder reached his ears. He glanced up and saw that a shower was coming up from the west. "Good," he muttered. "The darkness and the wind may help me." 2 sides of the Red House were surrounded by trees and bushes, and darting among them, the youth had no difficulty in reaching a side door which stood partly open. Listening intently, the young photographer heard a murmur of voices in the front, showing that the crowd had entered what had once been a sitting room. Throwing a number of strips of paper just outside of the door, Bob pushed his way inside. All was full of dirt and cobwebs, but to this the youth paid no attention. He had a mission, and he felt in duty bound to fulfill it despite either dirt or danger. From the side entry, Bob passed into the rear room, which was separated from the sitting room by a stairway leading to the second story. Under the stairs were a door leading to the sitting room, and also a deep closet. Peeping through the keyhole of the door, Bob saw the entire crowd seated around a table in the center of the room, smoking and drinking. "It's almost time Mavelt was here," observed Barker. He is taking all day to send that message." "Perhaps he's waiting for an answer," suggested Casco. "Did you tell him not to wait?" "No." "Then that is what he's doing." "Where is Horning?" "He said he would be here later." "We want this thing fully understood," put in Raymond. "I admit it's a big scheme, but if it don't work, we'll all be sent up for 10 years or more." "We'll be sent up for life," remarked Grogan. "'Tis no small work to throw a train off the track." "We won't throw her off unless it's necessary," said Barker. "Rankin will set the signal, if all is safe, and—" Bob could not catch what followed, for a burst of thunder drowned out all other sound. Yet he had heard enough. The evildoers were plotting to throw a certain train off the track, unless matters were all right. What was meant by all right? Casco's words shortly after solved the question. "The express car will carry over $40,000 on her trip, and Rankin will be in charge," he said. "If he gets no chance to throw it off, he will pull the bell rope, jump off, and join us. Then, when the train starts, we will throw over the loose rail, and over goes the train." "And what then?" put in Raymond. "I have a key to the safe, which has an ordinary lock, not a combination. You men can overpower the agent in charge while pretending to help the passengers, while I open the safe. We can carry axes to clear away such of the wreck as is necessary, and Grogan can be on the wagon." "And it's a good tame horse I have for the occasion," said the Irishman. "With the boodle in our possession, we can make off at top speed," went on Casco. "Then we will meet here, divide up equally, and separate." "Yes, but if Rankin says it's all right—" Another burst of thunder followed. Then came heavy drops of rain, followed by a perfect deluge. The conversation continued, but Bob could only catch an occasional word, and leaving the door, he walked back to the entry. "They're a nice gang of rascals, and no mistake," thought the youth. "For the sake of gaining money, they would derail a train and perhaps kill many passengers. Frank can't get here with those detectives any too soon." Bob looked outside. The rain was coming down in a perfect sheet, while the murky air seemed to be filled with lightning. "If it wasn't such a fearful storm, I would walk back to Dartingville, or up to Rayville and summon help," he muttered to himself. "But I couldn't make any progress in such a storm as this. Phew, how the wind blows!" A sharp streak of lightning followed, which made everything as bright as though the sun were shining. Somewhat blinded, Bob shrank back. As he did so, a hand was placed on his collar, and he was jerked rudely backwards. Chapter 32. Bob becomes a prisoner. "That's the time I caught you, you little sneak!" It was Casco who uttered the words, and it was he who had stepped up behind Bob and pulled him partly into the room. Without replying, the young photographer straightened up and led out with his right arm. The scar-faced man went backwards in such a hurry that he hit the wall opposite with considerable force. "Help!" he yelled. After the blow so well delivered, Bob turned to flee, knowing full well the danger of remaining an instant longer. Alarmed by the sound of the row, Barker rushed out into the entry, followed by Grogan and Raymond. "Who is it?" "Bob Alden! Catch him!" "That imp! Which way did he go?" "Out of the door!" As he spoke, Casco managed to regain his equilibrium, and he followed Barker and the others outside. "There he goes!" Barker and Grogan came after Bob, but the youth would have escaped by outdistancing them, had not just then something unexpected occurred. Bob was making for the roadway, when suddenly he ran plump into a man who was making tracks towards the red house. The force of the meeting was such that both went sprawling into the mud, and before Bob could arise, Barker was on top of him, and Grogan followed. "Here, what does this mean?" gasped the fellow Bob had knocked down. "Good for you, Horning!" laughed Barker. "We wanted him stopped, and you have done it." "Hang me if it isn't that young fellow who tried to down me," cried Horning as he sprang up and began to wipe the mud from his face. "March back to the house," ordered Barker to Bob. "No more escapes are in order. Understand." With something of a sinking heart, Bob turned about, and with Barker on one side of him and Grogan on the other, walked back and entered the sitting room, Horning following. "It's beastly weather," muttered the latter. "I would never have started out if I had known it was going to pour down like this. Did you see anything of Mavell?" "Yes, he's waiting for an answer to his message. Rankin may change the plan." "Pshaw! It wasn't necessary." Once in the red house, the whole crowd surrounded poor Bob, who was disarmed and then bound. "Yez shan't escape me again," said Grogan, I'll not go to sleep watching yous this time." "No, Mike, for the simple reason that I intend to do the watching this trip," laughed Barker. "You mean well enough, but you're not always to be trusted." "I will take him upstairs," said Barker. "I want to have a talk with him. Then I will come down and we can decide on what we intend to do." As he spoke, he winked at Casco, and the scar-faced man nodded. "Don't be long," said Raymond. "I want you to fix up that matter for me." "All right." Bob was compelled to march up to the second story of the house and into the front room. "Now sit down, Bob," said Barker as he closed the door. "I want you to tell me something." Bob took a seat. He saw that Barker's face was unusually cruel. The man looked capable of killing him then and there. "You followed Casco this morning, didn't you?" began the man. "Yes." "And you met Blake?" "I did. I arrived just in time to save him from being murdered." "So Casco told me. Now, I want to know what Blake told you." "Told me about what?" "About—" Barker hesitated an instant. "About me. Supposing I don't care to talk about the matter, I want you to answer me." Bob remained silent. Stepping over to the defenseless youth, Barker raised his hand and struck him in the face. "Now will you answer me?" "No." "You're mighty brave, I must say, but your bravery counts for nothing with me. And your bluster counts less with me. I have you in my power. I've been there before. And you think you can escape again. But you will not. Mark my word." "Maybe I will." Barker strode up and down the room a moment and glared at Bob. "Did Blake tell you anything about yourself?" he asked, coming to a halt. "I told you I wouldn't answer any questions." "You may ask me if it's going to stop raining soon and I'll have nothing to say." Barker grated his teeth. "May break him but never bend him," he muttered to himself. "I never saw his equal for pure spunk." "What did you hear downstairs?" went on the man, shifting his tactics. Instead of replying, Bob gazed up to the ceiling and began to whistle. Again, Barker raised his hand. "Stop that!" "Does it annoy you?" asked Bob coolly. "You don't seem to realize your situation." "Don't want to if it's going to scare me to death." But Bob did realize matters very plainly, and his chaff was only uttered to keep up his courage. "Look here, I'll—" began Barker when a crash of thunder drowned out his voice and made him shrink back in awe. "How long are you going to be up there?" called Casco from the foot of the stairs. "I'll be down in a little while," replied Barker. "Why?" "Mavelt is here." "What news does he bring?" "The money will be on the express tonight." "Tonight?" "Yes, we have just time to get ready and no more. Finish with that boy and come down." "That's all right, too, but—" A crash of thunder close at hand made both Barker and Bob jump. The crash was followed by one of a different sort, as a tree which had stood close at hand was split from top to bottom, and one side smashed in the entire window sash. "Oh!" howled Barker. "I can't stand this!" Pale as a ghost, he made for the door and ran down the stairs. "Now is my chance," thought Bob. "It's a great risk, but it's the only chance I have to save my life." Bound though he was, he managed to reach the broken window and climbed up on the sill. The tree, the top of which was on fire, still rested against the house, and upon this Bob threw himself and rolled to the ground. Some bushes were not far off, and as soon as he reached the soil, the young photographer rolled over and over until he was out of sight. Then came another streak of lightning, which almost blinded the youth. The air was filled with the smell of sulfur, while the noise was terrific. "Help! I help!" came from the interior of the red house, accompanied by the crash of falling walls. The lightning had struck the chimney and run down the center of the structure, ruining it completely. For the moment, Bob thought the end of the world had come. He lay still, a strange sensation darting like needles through his whole system. "Come on out if you value your lives," he heard Casco cry. "Sure and horniness kilt," howled Grogan as he came rushing forth. "The lightning struck him." "So it did! Come away!" Bob heard no more. Another crash of thunder roared in his ears, followed by a tremendous downpour of rain, and the crowd moved away to seek a new shelter. Poor Bob felt as weak as a sick kitten. He tried to move, but the shock to his nerves had been too much, and presently his senses left him, and all became a blank. When he returned to consciousness, it was beginning to grow dark. The rain had ceased, and the sky overhead was once more a deep blue flecked with white clouds. For a while, the young photographer could not remember where he was, nor what had happened, but gradually he recalled the scene in the upper chamber of the red house and what had followed, and raising his head, he looked around. The cottage was a mass of ruins, burnt and water-soaked, and beside it lay the tree the lightning had split, the top charred and blackened. "Thank heavens for that escape," murmured Bob. "My, what a close shave!" He was still bound, but by working steadily at the rope, he, after an hour's labor, managed to free himself. He ached in every joint, but to this he scarcely gave attention. His one thought was of the gang and what they intended to do. Approaching the cottage, he examined the ruins, but could see nothing of Horning's remains. Whether or not the gang had buried the man, the youth could not tell. Bob knew that the express of which the men had spoken would leave Stampton at 8 o'clock and would arrive in Dartingville at 8:30, making no stop except on Flag. It must now be 7 or half past. He must hurry. If the train and its passengers were to be saved, there was no time to lose. Bob knew it was at least 1.5 miles to the railroad track, and 2 miles to the nearest way station. Could he cover that distance in time? "I'll do it or die in the attempt," muttered the brave youth. "If I only had a horse," but there was no horse in sight, nor indeed any farmhouse where one might be procured. All was dark and lonely. Bob set out at a brisk gait. He felt like groaning at every step, but ground his teeth together and kept on. Either he would cover the necessary distance, or drop dead on the road. "They will find that I am not so easily overcome as they expected," he muttered grimly. "And now, with hundreds of lives at stake, what sort of a chap would I be to show the white feather?" Bob had to make a guess as to which was the shortest way to the nearest station, and praying that he was right and would arrive in time, he pushed on and on. Over the rough fields and through the brooks, now swollen high from the recent rain, went Bob, half walking and half running. He was hatless, and the jump from the window had nearly sprained his ankle, but what did he care? If those lives were to be saved, he alone must accomplish the task. At last, a long, low rumble reached his ears. "The track can't be far off, and that's a train." Bob paused for only a second to listen and to locate the sound. He was right. It was a train going in the opposite direction. "It's the last train through that way tonight," he said to himself. "Now the only one to pass the other way is the express, and that must be almost due." Off through a patch of woods, Bob heard the train slow up, come to a stop, and then start off again. "That means a station of some sort, most likely," was his mental comment. "Oh, if I can only reach it in time." Through the woods, the brush sweeping his face and scratching his skin, went Bob, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. He was almost played out. At last the woods were passed. Then came an open field, and beyond lay the iron tracks. Bob looked up and down. The little station was a good 100 yards off. "Stop the train!" cried the youth as he dashed up. Then he gave a cry of dismay. The place was deserted. The station master had locked up and gone home for the night. And now came a rumble from the distance, and looking down the tracks, Bob saw the gleaming headlight of an express as it came thundering along at the rate of 50 miles an hour. "If I only had a red lantern," groaned the youth. He looked around. Was there no lantern in sight? Hither and thither he rushed, growing more frantic every second. Ah! Here was an old lantern at last, but it was a common affair with a white glass and unlit. With nervous haste, Bob felt for a match and drew it forth. It was wet from the rain and refused to burn. He threw it away and pulled at another, and then another, and at last the lamp was lit and burned brightly. But alas, the light was white, and the danger signal must be red, and now the express was upon him. In 10 seconds it would be gone, and then what dire disaster would follow? Suddenly, Bob gave a jump. In his vest pocket was a small ruby lantern slide of red glass, such as nearly every professional photographer possesses. In feverish haste, Bob drew forth the bit of glass and held it in front of the white light. Then the red light was waved wildly to and fro as the express dashed past. Had the signal been seen? Chapter 33. Bob and his Mother. Conclusion. The single second which followed the passage of the express train seemed to Bob an age. He continued to swing the red light until he heard a shrill shriek of the whistle and saw the fire fly from the wheels of the locomotive as the engine was reversed. And then he staggered up against the little station. The express train had been saved! In less than 10 seconds, the conductor came running forward. "What's the matter, Boswell?" he cried. "Quick, we're behind time already." Bob tried to speak. His voice came almost in a sob. "Don't go! The track! The robbers have loosened a rail and—" "Hello? It ain't Boswell at all. Why, what's the matter with you? Rivers, Jones, come here!" The engineer and one of the brakesmen came at the call, and all three gazed at the young photographer, whose eyes were closed and whose form was gradually slipping down on the platform. "He's fainting," went on the conductor. "Here, help me place him on this baggage truck." "What did he stop the train for?" asked the engineer, as he assisted in making Bob comfortable. "I don't know. He said something about robbers and a loosened rail. Is that so? Wait till I get a bit of water and dash it onto his face." "He's been cut on the forehead," put in the brakeman, "and he seems completely exhausted. You can bet he didn't stop the train for nothing." Water was procured and dashed in Bob's face. With something of a shudder, he came to his senses. "Is the train safe?" he asked feebly. "So far, yes. But what's the trouble?" Bob was silent for a moment, as if trying to pull himself together. Then he sat up. "Where's the conductor?" "I'm the conductor." "You have an express car attached to the train?" "Yes, but what—" "Arrest the express agent." "Arrest him!" called three of the hearers. "Yes." "For what?" "He is with a gang of robbers to rob the car of $40,000 which you were carrying." "How do you know that?" "I overheard the plot." "Do you know the men?" "Yes." "Who are they?" Bob mentioned the name, then, in as few words as possible, he related how the deed was to be done. "I believe the boy is right," said the engineer. "I suspected something was wrong by the way Malvett acted yesterday. And come to think of it, he asked me the exact time we passed Gooseneck Falls." "Then that is the place where the gang will try to throw the train off." "Who are you?" "I'm Bob Alden, a traveling photographer. Mr. Maverick hired me to take pictures along the route for a new guidebook." "I've heard of you," said the conductor. "By Jove, but this is a rascally piece of business." "What's to be done?" asked the engineer. "We can't stay here all night." "I'll tell you what to do," said Bob. "Run back to the last station and get a number of officers, then run up to Gooseneck Falls and capture the rascals." "That's a good plan," said the conductor, "and in the meantime I'll stay with the express agent and see that he doesn't skip out." "Can I go along?" asked Bob. "Certainly, come, I'll help you to the parlor car, and you can go into the lavatory and wash up. The porter will give you some court plaster and such stuff if you need it." Bob braced up and was soon aboard the car. Then they started back, much to the surprise of the express agent, who came out to inquire what was up. The conductor told him and also ordered him to keep still. The fellow was very much frightened and said he knew nothing of the intended robbery. While the train was making fast time back to the last station of any size, Bob washed his face, bound up his wounds, and sat down to rest. The porter offered him some whiskey, but Bob declined. "I don't drink liquor, but if you have any coffee—" "Yes, sir, right away, sir," returned the darky, and just before the train came to a stop, the young photographer had a strong cup of coffee which made him feel like another person. Word was at once sent to the nearest police station, and presently 4 officers hurried to the train. Behind them came a form that looked familiar to Bob. It was Frank Lance. "I was out with the detectives, but I lost your trail in the storm. One of the men thought you'd come here. I was at the police station when the order for the men came in. What's up?" "They're going to bag the whole crowd," returned Bob. "Come on if you want to take part." Frank hopped aboard. In a second more they were off. The officers, with Bob, Frank, and the conductor, occupied the express car so that very few of the passengers on the train knew that anything unusual was going on, although they wondered why the run backwards had been made. The engineer crowded on the steam, and they went spinning along at the rate of 60 miles an hour. On the way, all hands talked over the prospects ahead. Suddenly, a whistle was heard and the train slowed up. "Here we are," said the conductor. "Gooseneck Falls are not over 100 yards ahead." Bob, Frank, and the officers jumped at once to the ground. Then they separated, the officers on one side of the track, and Bob and Frank on the other. "We ought to get some distance away from the track," said Bob. "It isn't likely the gang will remain close at hand when they expect the train to run off." "That's so, Bob," returned the young man. "Come, here's a path, let us take that." The path led to a spot fully 100 feet back of the train. They pursued it in silence until Bob caught Frank by the sleeve as a signal to stop. "What is it?" whispered the young man. "They're just ahead." "You're sure?" Yes, I hear Grogan talking. Hark! They listened. This time it was Barker who was speaking. Why is the train halting down there? I don't see anything of Rankin. That's what I would like to know, came in Casco's tones. Something's wrong. Sure, and that is fat I'm after thinking, put in Grogan. I've a good mind to go down and see, said Raymond. If there's anything wrong, the sooner we find out, the better. Oh, it's all right, put in a strange voice, which Bob supposed must be that of Malvolt. Don't get alarmed, the first thing. The storm upset me completely, said Barker. Hello, the train is coming on again. Yes, but awfully slow. They're watching the tracks, cried Casco. They must— He broke off short. Bob had given a signal to the officers on the other side of the track. In a second the signal was returned. The gang heard it as well as Frank and Bob. Something is amiss, cried Raymond, and we had better get out, added Grogan. He turned to run, but found himself confronted by the young photographer. Sure, and it's a ghost, he shrieked. Let me go! Before he could say a word more, Bob struck him in the head, and down went Grogan in a heap. What, Bob? Cried Barker, rushing forward. How did you escape? That's my business. Bill Dix, hold up your hands. The man addressed was dumbfounded. Did you hear? Went on Bob. Who told you I was Bill Dix? Cried the robber savagely as soon as he could recover. Never mind now. Up with your hands. Never! Dix, for that was really Barker's name, attempted to draw his pistol. Now came a rush from the other side of the track, and suddenly a pot of burning red fire lit up the scene. Surrender in the name of the law. Trapped! Yelled Casco. Boys, we must fight for it. But you shan't do any fighting, added Frank, and rushed up behind the scar-faced man. The young man wrenched the pistol from his hand and knocked him down. Raymond turned to flee, but one of the officers caught him. Will Malvolt was also secured, and in 5 minutes more the entire gang was under arrest. Who gave us away? Demanded Dix, while he was being taken to the train. I had that pleasure, returned Bob. I told you I would come out on top, Dix. Just wait till I get out of this scrap. You won't get out of it for a good many years, put in one of the officers, so you might as well keep your temper to yourself. The burning of the red fire and the pistol shots had aroused all the passengers, and they crowded around when the prisoners were brought to the train. A loosened and misplaced rail was found on the track 100 feet farther ahead. It was quickly adjusted and fastened down, and then the express proceeded to the next large station. At the depot there was a perfect jam, including many women who had been passengers on the express. They watched the transferring of the prisoners to the platform with deep interest. William Dix! Suddenly cried a woman from out of the crowd. Everybody, including Bob, turned towards the woman. She was a person apparently 40 years of age and dressed in black. Bill Dix, I must see that man, went on the woman, and she tried to push her way forward. Do you know the man? Questioned one of the officers. Yes, I've been hunting him for a long time. Oh, let me speak to him. You may do so at the station house. Thank you. So he's one of the robbers? I knew he was a bad man, but he is worse than I supposed. The woman followed the crowd to the station house, where Bob and Frank, as well as the chief of the officers, made a formal complaint against the gang. After this, 2 of the officers, accompanied by Frank, set out to recover what they could of the money and other things which had been stolen. For some reason he could not explain, Bob was deeply interested in the woman in black. Presently, seeing a good chance, he spoke to her. You say you know this Dix, he began. Yes, I've known him for years. I am very anxious to learn something about him, and I am very anxious to make him tell me something, returned the woman. He did me wrong, and I want him to do what he can to right it. He did me wrong also. Indeed. May I ask your name? I'm known as Bob Alden, but my right name is Bob Perry. The woman started back and grew as pale as death. Robert Perry! She gasped. Yes, but why, were you the son of Thomas Perry? An army officer? I was, and still am, but thank heavens! And the woman caught Bob in her arms. I don't understand, began Bob, with a curious sensation stealing over him. I am your mother, Bob. My mother? Yes, your mother. Oh, how glad I am that I have found you. I am glad, too, said Bob brokenly. His heart was jumping so much he could not say a great deal. But it's all so wonderful, he added after a moment. So it is. Where have you been all these years? Why didn't you come to my Uncle Robert's house?" "It's a long story. When your father was killed, I nearly lost my mind. When I was recovered, I was told by a man, who I afterwards found out was Dick's tool, that you had been stolen by the Indians. I made a long search lasting years. Then I was coming to your uncle's home, here in the East, when I learned that he was dead. It was quite by accident that I discovered the trick which had been played on me, and I at once set out to find you." "And I have been hunting for you," replied Bob with a beaming face. "I understand it all now. Dix was playing a double game, trying to keep me out of the way at one end and you out of the way at the other. But he has been foiled just as he deserved." When Dix was confronted by Bob and his newly found parent, he could not say a word. He had played a desperate game to the finish and lost. Bob conducted his mother to a hotel, and here the two spent a happy night. One of the first callers in the morning was Frank. He was astonished when Bob introduced Mrs. Perry. "So you won't be a nobody any longer, Bob, eh?" He smiled. Frank had glorious news. Aided by a confession made by Malville, he and the officers had recovered everything stolen by the gang, including John Wright's money and plate, Blake's package, and Frank's $1,800. "It's a great haul," said Bob, "and I believe it will settle this crowd for good." And he was right. But here we must leave Bob the photographer and pass over a period of several years. Bill Dix was tried and sentenced to 20 years in the state prison. After this sentence is finished, he will be sent to Virginia to answer to a charge involving murder. The other evildoers are also suffering the penalty of the law. Old Blake recovered from the attack made upon him by Casco and completely reformed. He now lives with his daughter, who is well settled in life. Frank Lands is a partner in the firm for which he formerly worked and is getting rich rapidly. Bob and his mother live in an elegant mansion in Stampton. The young photographer has taken sweet Grace Maverick for a wife. "And she couldn't do better, even though the young man isn't a millionaire," says Gregory Maverick, for he is more than pleased over Bob's show of bravery. But Bob is doing well in life, having at present not only the finest studio in Stampton, but also an interest in one of the largest photographic supply houses in the country. And so we will leave him, wishing him continued success. The end.